always, with my good friend, Rachel Person, the events manager from Northshire's Saratoga location. Zoom just talked to me for the first time about how it's being recorded. And that really startled me, guys. To tell you all, it's being recorded. I don't know if you heard that. It's the first time in doing all this for a year. Anyway, we're being recorded, but don't worry, only the people who are unmuted and in this nice little yellow box will be the ones appearing on our YouTube channel. So also a few more notes before we get started, and I hand things over to Rachel. If you have any questions for our authors at any point this evening, please type them into the chat. We'll save them up and pose them in the Q&A at the end of the end of the event. And finally, just a note of thanks. It's been a hard year for independent bookstores and independent businesses of all kinds, and we couldn't be here without your support. So we really appreciate it, and we have great gratitude. Let's get going. Rachel, introduce these authors. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. One more note before we start, which is a note of thanks to our friends at Saratoga Pride, who are hosting a ribbon cutting. Very exciting. One of the intersections by Congress Park has been painted with a rainbow, and there is a ribbon cutting this Thursday at 6. So if you're down by Congress Park in Saratoga Springs, go join in that. It's going to be amazing. I unfortunately will be here instead. But tonight I am so excited to get to welcome Nicolas DiDomizio to Northshire Live on the eve of the publication of his hilarious debut novel, Burn It All Down. Prior to his career in fiction, he wrote for the internet for several years, while also working in corporate roles at Condé Nast, MTV, and more. He lives here in Saratoga Springs, New York, and it is such an honor to get to celebrate with him tonight. He will be interviewed tonight by Hannah Orenstein, author of the romantic comedies Playing with Matches, Love at First Like, and Head Over Heels. Please join me in welcoming them to Northshire Live. And Nick, why don't you start things off by telling us a little bit about Burn It All Down?
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And even though it's virtual, it's still, such a lifelong dream. And I'm obsessed with Northshire as my new local indie. So I'm super grateful that you guys are hosting this event, and I can't wait to sign books in store tomorrow. But anyway, so yeah, I'll start by introducing myself. Nicolas DiDomizio. I wrote this book, Burn It All Down, which comes out tomorrow. And Burn It All Down is a buddy comedy revenge caper starring a mother-son duo who both have kind of a shared weakness for very bad men and toxic decisions and red flags. And so the book opens as they kind of are going through these really difficult breakups, and they decide that they've had enough, and they embark on a little revenge quest, which quickly escalates into a wine-fueled crime spree. And the wine that it's fueled by is Luna di Luna, which I'm drinking. And on that note, cheers, Hannah. Thank you so much for joining me today. Seriously, this is such a dream. Like, we go back several years to, back when we were, writing for the internet about a lot of the topics that we now write about in books. So I'm super excited.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. I wish I had Luna di Luna. I'm sorry, I only have that invitation, but huge.
It's hard to find. I literally had to order this a couple of weeks ago.
You're very prepared. I'm very prepared. So we're going to talk about a lot of your different inspirations for this book, but just to give us a brief overview, what led you specifically to write this novel?
So it's interesting because this is actually the third book that I've written, but obviously the first one that's being published. And the idea for this book was it first started with the characters, the mother-son duo that is very close, like almost like best friends, very kind of Gilmore Girls type of a thing. And so I always knew I wanted to center a story around that dynamic at some point, but I could never really figure out like how to go about it. So I worked on other projects for for several years. And then eventually, I got to the point after the second book wasn't really going anywhere that I realized it was time to write these characters that had been in my head for so long. So yeah, it was all about like, because like speaking of Gilmore Girls, it's like that the mother-daughter relationship or the single mom and daughter relationship. We've seen so many great versions of that with not just Gilmore Girls, but other places in pop culture. Natalie Portman plays the role of daughter very well in several early 2000s movies that I just love. But it's so, I don't think I've ever really seen like a fun story that centers around a single mother and her gay son. So that was the inspiration. And then obviously also kind of toxic men of our pasts were another part of the inspiration. And then kind of once I started with that kernel, the characters took on lives of their own. The story became just a totally crazy journey that really has very little in common with any real life experiences. So yeah, but that was the kernel. It was definitely the two characters and that dynamic.
I know that I've told you this so many times, but I think that Joey and Gia are so memorable, so lovable, so funny. I was laughing so loudly in my apartment while reading this that I was going to hear me and get upset.
That makes me so happy.
It's such a treasure of a book. And the road to getting published is never an easy one. You just said that, this was the third novel that you had worked on, but what was it like to go from the first draft to actually today or tomorrow when you see it on shelves for the first time?
Such a good question. And literally this is like the question that when you're like, struggling and like not seeing any results for all of your work, it's like the one that you kind of like dream about answering one day, so you can say like, it was so fucking hard like all those years. But it was all worth it. No, so the journey, it literally started like a decade ago, when I first had the idea for my first book, which was actually a memoir. So and I spent like 4 years trying to make that book happen. Like I obsessed over it, and I was like very precious with like every sentence basically. And it was and so I queried like a million agents. So for anyone who's listening who doesn't know like the basic process, it's that to be published, you first have to get an agent, and agents don't get paid unless your book is published. So it's very hard to get an agent to commit to you, because they have to put in a lot of work up front before they have any guarantee that it's going to pay off. So and it's obviously the same thing with an author. You have to write the book first before knowing if it's going to do anything for you. So anyway, so with that first book, it was just years of writing and rewriting and querying, and then querying more, and just like trying desperately to make it happen. But it was, I think because it was nonfiction, most of the feedback that I got was that as an unknown author and someone with like no real platform, it was too risky to kind of just put out a book that was like, here's 300 pages about my shitty like late teen and early 20s boyfriends type of, which is really what the book was. So it all made its way eventually into here somehow. But yeah, so that was the first book. So then I started writing for the internet. I saw one of my critique partners just commented that memoir rocked. Thank you, Julia. So we were both in the trenches together. It was like a saga from like 2012 to like 2016. Anyway, so after that, that's when I started, and then I wrote for Mike.com, which is kind of how we initially learned about each other, because I remember you were at 17. And anyway, so after the whole Mike thing happened, which didn't give me the overnight like internet fame that I was hoping, because basically my plan was like, okay, I'll get internet famous, then my memoir will be published, but didn't quite happen that way. So anyway, so then I pivoted, I wrote my second book, which was a novel And that one actually did get me an agent. But we had kind of a journey with that. And there was a lot of like really good feedback from editors, a lot of close calls. It went to acquisitions, which is the stage where like the editor really likes it, but they have to convince the rest of the publishing company to sign on. So yeah, that was kind of that was where I started to get super close, but like no cigar still. So then this is where the story gets fun and festive and fast. January 2019, the last book went to acquisitions. And I remember like the day that it went, because it was a Thursday, which is usually when those meetings are. And I was at work all day and like had heard nothing. And I was like literally, on the edge of my seat, because it's like by the end of the day, I'll either like my dream will come true or it'll be like nothing happened. So it ended up being like nothing happened. It was quite the crushing situation. And I basically decided then that the book, so I had been like messing around with this idea by then, but I hadn't really like focused on it. But basically after that, I was like, this is bullshit. You have to like work so much before any like publisher takes a chance on you, like, and it could literally never pay off. And at that point I had been doing it for like 7 years and seen like no return. But I was like, I really love this story, so I'm going to just write it as quickly as possible so that it's written, and then I'll see what happens from there. So I literally finished it in March. So it was like it was like a whirlwind of drafting. And then it sold in June. So it was a lot of like long, arduous, nothing's happening. And then I wrote the like quickest book of my life, and it sold really quickly. So yeah, that was a very long answer, but it was a very long journey.
Just to hammer it home for people who have not written a novel, writing a novel in 2 months is insane. It's really fast. And you and I were drinking wine and talking about books a couple of weeks ago, and you mentioned that you would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and write every day for 3 hours before you went to your full-time job, which is just so impressive. The work ethic required for that, the dedication to forgoing sleep is just very admirable. But I would love to hear more about how you wrote a draft of this quality so quickly, how you edited it so quickly and turned it around to be something truly spectacular.
Thank you so much. So I will say that it was a lot of discipline, but it was almost like a reverse laziness, because the whole idea behind it was like, let me just get this over with so I can like never do this again. So I was definitely, the thing that kept me going was knowing that it was gonna like end at some point. I wish I could have that level of discipline like now. But anyway, so yeah, it was a pretty intense, but it was like once I got into the groove and once I accepted that like I wasn't going to have a life outside of work and this book, because in addition to the 4 a.m., I would also work on it after work, and then I would spend like literally Saturday and Sunday just fully immersed. So it was a true labor of love. I also didn't shave, because I was taking a page out of Julian Edelman from the Patriots, because it was the football playoffs, and so like he had this huge playoff beard, and I was like, you know what, maybe I'll do that. And then also it saved me time, for like more time to write, because I wasn't shaving. So I was looking pretty gross, which was funny because I worked at Vogue at the time. So I would just like walk by Anna Wintour like in the hallway with like my LL Bean rugby shirt and like my huge beard. But yeah, I would say my secret for the discipline was constantly telling myself that like this is going to be over soon. But it was also super fun too. Like this was like such a fun book to write, and the characters are just like, I know they're like not real people, but I feel like I poured so much of myself into them. And So it was, I got very invested. I felt like I was writing it, but like I was also actively a reader too.
Your characters are so much fun. They make a lot of really questionable decisions. They are, in fact, criminals. They do commit arson, as you might be able to tell from this gorgeous cover. But even despite all of this, you're like, oh, like, don't burn it down, but like, please burn it down. And you're rooting them on to do these terrible things, but you also want to see them have their happy ending. So how did you craft this really fantastic mother-son relationship? And I'm curious, as somebody who often connects like more to one of my characters than the other, like, did you have an easier time with either Joey or Gia? How did you go about crafting that relationship?
First, thank you so much, because I feel like coming from you, that means a lot, because I remember when I was reading your second book and your main character, it was like a similar thing. She kept doing really just the thing that I would like I understood why she was doing it. Like she just, like she lied and then it snowballed and then it turned in, and I was like, oh my God, girl, please. But I loved her, and I, so I feel like coming from you, that means a lot, because that is totally an experience I've had while reading your work too. So yeah, the dynamic, it was very interesting. I feel like I have equal love for both of them. Because Joey was so much fun to write, because he's a comedian. And so, and obviously like one of the things I love about writing is just infusing humor into it, and, making it as like ridiculous and outlandish as possible. And I think it really helped that he's also very young. So I could just make some of these like crazy jokes and maybe, in ways that like an adult might censor themselves a little more. So I loved that about him. But Gia, I feel like is equally as fun, and almost even the more important character, even though she's not narrating the book, but her presence was just like, it just like became so strong. Like if I was, she just like jumped out of my fingers and onto the keyboard in such a way that I haven't really had with any other character I've written. And I just love that, like I could flip the book open and just like look at a random like line of dialogue, and if it's a Gia line, like I'll immediately know if it's Gia or not. Like her voice just came, so quickly and effortlessly in a way which very rarely happens when writing, as I'm sure you can relate.
Well, I want to be her best friend. She is really fabulous. Kind of scares me a little bit, but in a good way.
Right. It's like that line of like, what's she gonna do?
I want to keep reading to find out.
Right.
So both Joey and Gia go on these journeys throughout this book, inspired by toxic relationships. And there's a lot in this novel that plays with the trope of the nice guy versus the bad boy, and the appeal of each of those different archetypes. What did you want to convey with those stories about dating and relationships?
So much, because I feel like, and I'm so glad you like brought that up, because I feel like underneath all of the hijinks and the crime and the craziness, the whole nice guy bad boy journey is really like at the core of the story, and the emotional kind of arc of these characters, where they're stuck in that pattern that I know I've been in when I was in my late teens and early 20s, where you're just kind of the guys who are like super into you and lovely and would make like great partners, for some reason seem kind of repulsive, and it's like, oh my God, why do you like me? Get away. And then there's like the asshole who is like very emotionally withdrawn and like doesn't really give you a lot to work with, but for some reason they seem more exciting and attractive, and it's like you want to win the prize of like being the one person in the world that they're not an asshole to. So that was my that was my journey for like a very long time. And it was certainly a journey that I know my mom went through as well when, you know, growing up with a single mom. So I wanted to kind of show characters who acknowledge this pattern, who kind of deal with it, who acknowledge it and recognize it and confront it and try to find a way to break it. Which, you know, could be like literally, there could be so many ways to do that. Like it could be any plot. It certainly didn't have to be a crime spree. But I feel like once I started getting into it and really giving them, because what they really want in the beginning of the book is revenge. And so once I gave them a taste of it, I was like, all right, let's just take this as far as we could possibly take it and like, you know, see where that goes. And it went to such a great place. And I think the craziness of their crime spree and everything that results from it is exactly what these characters needed to be like smacked over the head to actually, hopefully, I don't want to like give too many spoilers, but you know, to hopefully start to break these patterns and question what it is inside of them that makes them drawn to these people that they should run screaming from.
Yeah, I don't want to give too many spoilers or any spoilers, but I will say that what starts as a quest for revenge turns into almost like a wine/crime fueled therapy session.
Right.
Eventually,
wine and crime.
Yes, and it eventually turns into this really beautiful lesson about the power of self-love and the power of, you know, their love for each other. So I won't say any more, but it is gorgeous. And you have a background writing about dating and relationships on the internet. That's sort of how we met, both writing about those topics online. And I'm curious how those experiences, because I know firsthand it's overwhelming, shapes your writing fiction about dating and relationships.
They definitely shaped. I mean, I feel like my stint writing for the internet, which really wasn't that long, you know, in comparison to some people, it was like less than 2 years. But you know, it's such a fast-paced world, and being you know, I was writing like 2 to 4 stories a day and trying to squeeze in like longer features. So so the first thing, this isn't directly an answer, but I'll get to the dating and relationship stuff. But I feel like the first thing I learned from that was just being able to like, you know, meet a deadline, which was something that I wasn't great at. And maybe that's why I spent so many years with my other books, because I was like, I'll just do this, you know, when I have the time. Versus when you're working professionally like that, you really just, you can't get writer's block. You can't like wait for inspiration or whatever. You just have to do it. And so that was the first thing that kind of prepared me to write this story from working in that world. And then the second thing, yeah, I think when you're on like the sex and dating and relationships beat, some of the stories that you come across, and especially in like 2015, 2016, and I know you'll relate to this, is that like there was so much pressure to like go viral with your, even if it was just like a quick hit news piece that you were doing, you know, turning around in like an hour. There was so much pressure to like do the quick hit news story on like something so crazy that you could put like a ridiculous headline on it and you know, have it perform well on social. So yeah, I reported on a lot of like weird shit that that people did, and it was also a time in the internet where it's like you would literally just like write a story about someone's tweet thread about like what happened with their boyfriend the night before or something. So it was kind of anthropological in that way of seeing like, seeing like people are out here just being so messy in their like lives and in their relationships, and like I related to it as well. I mean, by this time I was in a healthy relationship, which was great, but I related, you know, just from the past being like, oh my God, it's almost like, you know, reading one of our books. So I feel like doing that day in and day out, and then of course I was also writing about like celebrity relationships and all their messy drama. So yeah, it definitely gave me a lot of material and also like permission to just let this story be crazy and messy and unfiltered, because that's like shit like this happens. Even, I mean, even as crazy as this book goes, I mean, I feel like someone's like, every time someone burns down a house, like anywhere in the country, if I have like a friend in that region, they will like send me the news link and be like, oh, look, arson. Like, so, it happens. Like people are just, we're all trying to figure our shit out. And obviously you don't need to like write for the internet to to come to that revelation, but it certainly accelerates it.
Yeah, no, I love mess, to quote an icon.
Right. Yes, Marie.
I don't know if we have this set up, but I have a Google alert for playing with matches, which is the title of my first book. But in practice, what that means is that every day Google tells me about all of the arson that's going around the country, which is amazing. I will say quite a bit.
Right. It's like pretty ridiculous. Playing with matches, which also, if everyone watching, so this is the back of my book, and we have Hannah's blurb on a book of matches. So that's just a fun nugget. Anyway.
So one thing that some of your readers might have seen this morning was you did a really great piece about the 30th anniversary of Thelma and Louise, which came out 30 years ago today. And this novel shares some DNA with that movie. So I would love to hear more about that connection and how that inspired your work.
Yes. Oh my God. So I like love that movie. It's like a top 3 for me. And it really was kind of like earlier when I was talking about how I had these characters in my head for so many years. It was after like rewatching Thelma and Louise that I started to think, okay, let me like up the stakes and really give them what they need, because just like Thelma and Louise, these characters had so much anger and like repressed anger, and it's so cathartic when you watch that movie to watch them express it and just like say like, you know what, I've fucking had it, and I'm just gonna go there and like blow up this fuel tanker and do all of these things after like just a lifetime of mistreatment. And I mean, talk about criminals that like you root for. Like those are like, and one thing that, a note that I did get on this in earlier drafts was that, it's always like a tricky thing when you're, especially with novels, when you're writing characters who are breaking the law and like doing these things, and trying to give them some redeeming factor and likability, and having them show that they're not totally twisted, and they're capable of feeling remorse when they do these things and stuff. I tried to infuse all of that into my book. But one thing I really love about Thelma and Louise is that there's just no fucking remorse. They're like, okay, the cops got us. We're going to drive off a cliff because we don't want you to have the last word on this. Like, it was just to the very end, just such an amazing movie. I gave away all the spoilers, but I'm sure everyone has seen it. But yeah, so they really, I think without that movie, I don't know how I would have figured out how to, I might have just given them a totally different journey and eschewed crime entirely. But thankfully Thelma and Louise exists, and it was just a huge, huge inspiration. I'm so obsessed. I literally want to go watch it now, and I probably will. And my boyfriend will tell you that it's on in our house, once a month at least. That and Moonstruck, which we've talked about on Twitter.
Yeah. If people are reading Burn It All Down soon, I really recommend Thelma and Louise as nice palate cleanser, nice follow-up. You get both. Yes. They play off each other really, really well.
Absolutely.
Another really iconic 90s influence in this book is Monica Lewinsky. Queen Monica Lewinsky.
Yes.
And she is a personal hero of Joey and Gia's, and I know that you also like her very much. So I'm curious, what is it about her story that inspires you? And also, if she were here listening tonight, what would you like to say to Monica?
I love this question. Okay, so I'm gonna answer the first one first so that I can like formulate in the back of my head what I would say. But yeah, so I mean, I think that I was, when the whole Clinton scandal happened, I was like 10 years old, maybe. So, I obviously didn't fully grasp what was going on, but what I grasped was that she was really just painted as this like psycho villain slut, like horrible person, and total punchline. And just like she went through the ringer. And I remember even back then feeling some type of way about like how fucked up that was. And maybe it was because I did have a single mom, and I had, seen her certainly deal with like misogyny and all of that shit. And so I found it very unsettling at the time, and without even fully knowing the story. And then anyway, fast forward like however many years later, I picked up a copy of Vanity Fair, and she had written like a first person essay. You probably remember what it was. It was like she was like in a dress and like posed, and it was just a beautiful spread and just a beautiful essay about her personal experience of just like being bullied on such a huge national scale by like literally the entire country. And so that was the first time where I was like, as an adult, like, holy shit, we all just owe Monica an apology. Because, her, all she did was be like in her early 20s, which, as I already said, that's when you're gonna be drawn to the wrong guy and make your stupid decisions. And so like she had a crush on her boss, who happened to be the most powerful man in the world, and married. But like, it's 100% on him. He was 30 years older. He was stringing her along. He was giving her gifts. He was constantly calling her and telling her like that he was going to leave his wife, the first lady. He was doing all these things. You say that to like a 20-year-old, like they're going to be all in. Like, so I really just didn't see how she did anything wrong. And in a weird way, I related to her. Not that I've ever like, messed around with a president, but Bill was very much doing, not that I mean to besmirch anyone, but he was totally being like the toxic, unavailable guy to someone who was like so much younger, impressionable, like, and it reminded me of like when I was in high school and I was dating older guys, and sometimes they had boyfriends or girlfriends, and they would just like kind of keep you on the side and tell you, and in your mind you think like, okay, well, he's gonna like eventually leave them for me and it'll be great. So anyway, I just really saw myself in her. This is all a long way of saying that. And I just love that despite going through what must be like the, on that scale, she somehow was able to kind of grow from it and like come out of it without being like totally bitter and angry. And I mean, like, because if there's anyone who should have gone on a crime spree, I would say Monica. Like she should have fucking burned the White House down. But obviously that's good that she didn't. And she's a great example of someone who was able to not let all of the crap that men put her through bring her down. Instead, she really came out of it as like, now she's like a huge leading voice and like anti-bullying in that movement and everything. So yeah, if she were here tonight, I would say thank you so much for being an inspiration, and can I please send you a copy?
I was just gonna say, she needs a copy. I think she would love it.
Yes. I'm gonna like at some point really try to sit down and figure out how to make that happen.
She's amazing on Twitter. Maybe a Twitter DM.
Her tweets are iconic.
She's amazing.
It's true.
I just want to remind everybody watching that do have questions, you can drop them in the chat. We have a couple more questions that we're going to chat about, but just a reminder. So this book is deeply, deeply hilarious. And as somebody who is always trying to punch up the jokes in my writing, I would love to hear your secrets for writing really effective comedy.
Love this question. And this actually came up earlier today. I did an interview with our local NPR, and I was talking about how when I really, really got into writing, I feel like the first books that I loved were comedian memoirs, and highbrow, lowbrow, Chelsea Handler's books were huge for me. I just remember reading her in college and being like, this is just fun and funny, and it's not deep. It's just I'm having fun. And obviously David Sedaris for a little more literary, and Tina Fey's book. I mean, there's so many. So I think as a reader, I've always just been drawn to books that can make me smile or laugh or, anything. So I think the first part is just being I don't actually know. And then I guess when I'm writing, I just kind of not try to emulate, but keep in the back of my head, if I were reading, what would I want? What would really make me be oh, fuck, he said that? Shit like that, So I think always in the back of my head, when I'm writing, and especially when I was writing this book, it was constantly being on myself about whether or not I was having fun. And if there was a page or two that I wasn't, I mean, some pages aren't a joyride. Some of them are a little more emotional, and there's definitely the full spectrum, but 9 times out of 10 I was if I'm not having fun, I'm going to just delete it, because if I don't have fun writing it, then people might not have fun reading it, and that would be the worst thing. Maybe also just fear, being terribly afraid that someone's just going to put it down and be this sucks, so I think a combination of fun and fear.
That's really good advice. And Joey is an aspiring comic in the book, and one of the most heartwarming parts of the book, in my opinion, is seeing him find his confidence through ultimately working on his goals in comedy. He's a little note app on his phone where he's jotting down ideas for jokes, and it's very satisfying to watch him grow in that way. And I'm curious what sparked your interest in writing about comedy, and if you have a background in that as well.
So I don't have a personal background in comedy. It was definitely something I've thought about before, and just could never, I've had the running app of notes or of jokes in my phone, but I could never write jokes that I thought were good enough to actually say on stage in front of people and be confident that they weren't just gonna throw shit at me. And so I never really got to that point, but there was a little bit of autobiographical inspiration with giving him that kind of passion. And another kind of unlikely thing, which people would probably be shocked to hear, but right before I was writing this, I was listening to, so my boyfriend and I listened to Howard Stern a lot, and he did an interview with Pete Davidson, and his interviews are if you haven't listened, they're super detailed and weirdly deep and serious. And Pete was talking about how he first started getting the confidence to go up on stage, and this was in his late teens, and he would have to sneak into clubs and stuff, and it was weird listening to him. I was I can't believe he just, because he was very open about just having low self-esteem and being very self-loathing, and the way he approached it was more well, I know I'm a piece of shit, so if they call me a piece of shit, then they're not telling me anything I don't already know. And so he talked about how that kind of shaped his early start doing stand-up, and if you YouTube his early stand-up, I mean, some of it is really funny, and he definitely has a delivery and everything, but some of it is not great. But it's kind of part of the, being an early comic. You have to bomb and just try everything until you figure out what works. So So I wanted to kind of show a truncated version of that with Joey, where he's funny enough to know that he's not funny at first, and he knows when he sucks, but he works toward kind of getting over that and just throwing all of that self-consciousness out the door. So I mean, TBD if he actually does. I won't give it away, but yeah, that was a super fun like subplot to incorporate into it, because I love comedy so much as like a viewer, and who doesn't love to laugh?
Yeah, one of my favorite authors when I was like first getting into books was also David Sedaris, so I feel like that's a good gateway.
Oh, he's so good, but he will totally induce those feelings of like inadequacy, because somehow he makes it funny, but he also makes it like smart and literary, and all of those things wrapped into one. And every time I read him, I'm like, oh, this is so great, but I'll never.
But you are having these people who are reading this book now, and they're like, oh, I could never do what he does. So that's just the cycle of life.
Oh my God, yes, I love it. The cycle of life.
So I know this is a really, really hectic, busy week for you. Not like you have a ton going on, just like a book launch. But I am curious what you have coming up next.
Up next. So, well, tomorrow I'll be signing at Northshire, which I'm so excited about. Wednesday, I'll be doing an event with Murder by the Book, which is in Houston, Texas. Super excited for that. That's with Elsie Rosen. What am I doing? I have an Instagram live on Friday as well with Robin Call, who I don't know. Have you ever done a live with her? She's so great. I'm so excited. I feel like that's like such an author rite of passage that I'm like really excited about, and I'm glad that it's like Friday, so it's like the finale of launch week. And then there's a few events in the coming weeks, all of which are listed on my website.
Amazing. Somebody just asked in the chat, what time will you be signing tomorrow?
I think I'm supposed to go in at 10:30.
Yes. So any orders placed on our website before then, we could have personalized if you make something in the notes. Actually, I would say place the order tonight, just so that we can process it tomorrow morning, because we open at 10. So you can order online with personalization requests, and any orders that have been placed already will be signed before they get shipped out.
So excited. I can't believe I'm going to be like signing and personalizing and like doing all that stuff.
It's really fun. Your hand is going to cramp up, but it'll be totally worth it. So enjoy it.
Oh my God. I literally had created a new like signature specifically for book signing, because my other one is like so ugly. So hopefully by the end of tomorrow, I'll have it down.
Beautiful. Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you for the audience Q&A, but Nick, I just wanted to say congratulations again. I am just like over the moon enthusiastic about this book, and I think everybody needs to be reading it this summer.
Oh my God, thank you so much. Honestly, like to celebrate launch with you after all of these years of like, being internet buddies, and like you just being such an inspiration. Like I remember seeing when Playing with Matches came out, and I came across it at the Stop and Shop in Bayonne, New Jersey, which this book takes place in. And it was like such a moment for me to like say, you know what, like it can happen, keep going. It's not impossible. And so like, you've just been such an amazing inspiration, and your books have inspired me. So thank you so much again.
Well, I will blush forever, but let's drink wine soon.
Yes. I have the Luna de Luna if you're ever upstate.
Great. I will be there.
Cheers.
Thank you both. It's been really fun listening to you both. Our first audience question in the chat came in from Stephen. They asked, Nick, can you fan cast Joey, Gia, Will, Marco, and Nana? And the film adaptation, which must happen, who would be your dream casting choices for all those characters?
Woo! So thank you, Stephen. Love you, big fan of your work. Assuming it's the Stephen I think it is. Wow, that's the whole cast. Okay, so I'm gonna say Dreamcast. So whether or not it's reality and feasible is up for debate. But Gia, Lady Gaga, for sure. I just feel like she has the energy, she has the range. Joey, I'm gonna say an unknown, someone who like needs a breakout role, and is chaotic and Italian and gay and a little crazy. Gosh. Oh, Marco, what's his name? Chris Messina from like the mini. Okay, yeah. Chris Messina. Nona. She's a tough one because she's such a good character. Maybe Cher. Like she was really good as Italian in Moonstruck. I feel like she could reprise the Loretta Castorini kind of look, and she could be Nona. I love this. Thank you so much for that question.
Eddie has a follow-up to that question. He says, what would Joey and Gia's theme song be? I feel like there needs to be a shot of them walking away from the fire in slow motion with something badass playing.
That's so very true. Well, they have several theme songs that they mention in the book. But I'm gonna try to be a cool teen right now and say that it would be Good For You by Olivia Rodrigo. Because, you know, we've all been bumping sour, and I feel like that song is like, it's like the You Ought to Know of Gen Z. So yeah, Good For You.
There's another question from Stephen. They ask, if you could write from any other character's POV in the novel, who would it be and why would it be Gia? Also, would you?
I mean, right, why would it be Gia? Because, well, you know, it's actually funny. I thought about writing from both of their POVs at one point, but I do feel like they're so similar. Well, actually, no, her voice would be fun. It would be, maybe if this really blows up to like Twilight levels, I will do what she did and write the same exact book from the other character's perspective. And that would probably be a lot of fun.
And then there's a question from Sarah. What songs are on the soundtrack? And she also said, and why are they all Mariah Carey?
Oh my God. I just realized there's no Mariah representation in this book, which is kind of like crazy because anyone who knows me, I'm like the biggest Mariah fan. But you know what? My critique partner, Steven, wrote an amazing book. It's called Can't Take That Away. And it came out in March. And their book is like literally a love letter to Mariah. So I feel like the Mariah book representation is covered. But yeah, no. So the soundtrack actually is, well, so I have a soundtrack on Spotify, which you can find on my link tree. And it's like a lot of just angry, like angsty breakup music, which I think pretty much, you know, it's the whole tone of the book, but like definitely You Ought to Know is on there. Breaking Dishes by Rihanna, which is like not one of her hits, but just an iconic song about trashing a house. And Before He Cheats, of course, by Carrie Underwood. There's just so many classics in that genre of song, of just like being really pissed off and like getting revenge, which was, you know, another thing that made this book so fun to write, because it was like, you know, we've all been there. We've all had these revenge fantasies.
So I actually have a question for you, Nick, which is, it's unusual for a book with an 18-year-old main character to be shelved in the adult section of the bookstore as opposed to the YA section of the bookstore. But this is clearly a book written for adults. It's very much a book for grown-ups.
Right.
Did you ever toy with it as a YA novel when you were writing, or was that decision to be writing for grown-ups something that was always part of your process?
That is such a great question. So it was kind of as I wrote it, I did the thing which some people like, you know, some people give the advice for writers, like write what you want to read. And other people think that advice is bad, because if you literally only write what you want to read and without thinking about the market and the publishing industry and who the audience is and all that, you know, you could end up screwing yourself. But I literally wrote the book I wanted to read without thinking about market, without thinking about anything. And so when I sent it to my agent, you know, it was a fun challenge for her because it was like, you know, she's really big in the YA world, and that's definitely her lane. And so she was like, you know, this is pretty mature for, you know, the YA editors that I typically would choose to submit to. But at the same time, you know, YA is evolving, and maybe someone will want it. So we actually ended up submitting to both YA and adult editors at the same time, which was interesting. But very quickly, the feedback from the YA crowd was that it seemed like the tone and everything was more adult, and also because like Gia is such a main character, and even though she's not narrating, it's like as a reader you're so invested in her, and she's, you know, a 34-year-old woman. So yeah, ultimately it ended up being shelved as adult, but certainly I think like more mature readers of YA could find something to love with it too.
Well, we are just about out of time, but we've still got another question from Steven here. And he says, if Gia could get drunk and hang out with any of the Real Housewives of New Jersey, who would she pick?
Teresa Giudice. Well, actually, I think that would be too much. Okay, no, I'm going to say Melissa Gorga, because Melissa is a very good listener. But she's still very Jersey, still very Italian, still has like the edge to her, but you know, she wouldn't, like, if you see, like, for instance, this is getting way too like in-depth Jersey Housewives, but if you see Melissa and Teresa together, you'll notice like Melissa kind of, because Teresa's like the totally like amazing but kind of nuts hot mess of the group, but so you see them together and Melissa kind of just takes Teresa for what she is and lets her shine, type of a thing. She's also her sister-in-law, but anyway, so yeah, I feel like Melissa and Gia would be a good combination, but then also like I would have to be there as well.
Nice. So we do have time for one last quick question, which just came in from Katie, asking, do you have any other books on the horizon that you can tell us about?
Fingers crossed that it's on the horizon. It's currently in my hands. I'm editing it at the moment before my agent sends it to the publisher. But yes, it is a wedding comedy, and it's so a little different. There's no crime element to it, but it's basically about a gay guy who is the best man for his childhood best friend, but he's also very, very good friends with the bride. So he ends up, you know, throwing the bachelor party and then also going to the bachelorette party as, you know, kind of the fun gay friend. And anyway, both parties, crazy shit goes down. Secrets that the couple is keeping from each other are revealed, and it gets very like reality TV very fast and unravels, and is a fun. I think it's just as fun, but you know, different.
That sounds fantastic. Well, Nicholas, Hannah, thank you both so much. The book is Burn It All Down by Nicolas DiDomizio. It is available at northshire.com with signed copies as of tomorrow morning. Just use the notes field if you would like one of those. Thank you both so much for your time tonight. Thank you, audience, for being here. This has been a really lovely time. And have a great night, everybody.
Yay. Thank you so much again for having me. I can't wait to see you tomorrow.
Thank you, and have a great night, everyone.
Bye everyone.